used my final days to bury a corrupt dynasty under the weight of their own crimes. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that a father's job isn't done until his child is safe, even if it takes his very last breath. My name is Jack Harper, and I've spent 40 years working on oil rigs, breaking my back for a paycheck while breathing in fumes that finally turned into stage 4 cancer. I have nothing left in this world except my daughter, Chloe. When I arrived at the hospital in Atlanta, the air smelled of antiseptic and despair. Chloe was barely recognizable. The nurse told me it was the 3rd time she'd been admitted this year. She says she's clumsy, the nurse whispered, angry tears in her eyes. But we know what he does to her. The Vances. They own this city, the police won't touch them. Richard Vance walked around the hospital wing like he owned it, because his father practically did. He saw me, a rough, dying old man in work boots, and sneered. "Look, Jack," he said, checking his Rolex. "It's a tragedy, but Chloe is fragile. We don't need the stress of a family reunion right now. Take the money and go enjoy your retirement." I walked out of that hospital without looking back. My boots squeaked against the polished tile floor, a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet corridor. My chest felt tight, a familiar burning sensation that reminded me of the clock ticking inside my lungs. 60 days. Maybe less if the stress got to me, but I didn't have time to die yet. Richard watched me leave. I could feel his eyes on my back, arrogant and dismissive. He thought I was a broken old dog, taking a bone and slinking away to a corner to expire. He was right about the dying part. He was wrong about the dog. I didn't go to the airport. I went to a bank 3 towns over. I cashed the check. $50,000. It was dirty money, blood money paid to silence a father while his daughter lay in a coma. I held the cash in my hands. It felt heavy. I wasn't going to spend it on a retirement. I was going to spend it on war. I rented a cheap motel room on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where the clerk doesn't ask for ID if you slide an extra 20 across the counter. The room smelled of stale smoke and regret. It was perfect. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress and took out a small notebook. My hands were shaking, not from
Consider the
fear,
weight of a
but from the
single
rage
decision,
vibrating in my
rippling
marrow.
outward
I made
through
a list.
time,
Richard
affecting
Vance,
lives we
Marcus
will never
Vance,
know.
the father,
The illusion of time
the
comforts
business,
us, yet
the
beneath it
reputation.
everything is happening
I wasn't
all at
going
once.
to shoot Richard.
We are
A
merely
bullet was too
observers in a
fast,
constant
too
present.
merciful.
We often
And if I
overlook the
shot him,
simplest
his
truths
father,
because
Marcus
they are the
Vance,
hardest to
the
accept.
real power in this city,
But today,
would
we
turn him
must
into
face
a
them
martyr.
together,
Chloe
without
would be the
blinking.
grieving widow of a beloved
Oh,
philanthropist, and I'd be the crazy, estranged father. No. I had to kill them without touching them. I had to make
the
them eat
illusion of
each other.
time comforts
I
us,
needed
yet
supplies.
beneath it
I
everything
went to a
is
pawn
happening
shop
all
and
at
bought
once.
3 burner phones,
We are
a
merely
high-powered
observers in
camera
a
with a
constant
telephoto
present.
lens,
We
and a
often
used
overlook the
laptop.
simplest truths
Then,
because
I
they are
bought
the
a beat-up
hardest to
gray
accept.
sedan from a
But
private seller for
today,
cash.
we must
It
face
was
them
invisible.
together, without
A ghost
blinking.
car, that night, I parked 2 blocks away from the Vance estate. It was a fortress, high walls, iron gates, security cameras. It looked impenetrable, but I've spent 40 years on rigs. I know that every machine, no matter how big, has a pressure point. You just have to listen for the hiss of the leak. I sat in the dark, coughing into a handkerchief until it came away speckled with red. I watched. Richard came home at 2 a.m. He wasn't alone. A blonde woman, young enough to be his daughter, was in the passenger seat of his Porsche. He was laughing. My daughter was breathing through a tube, and he was laughing. I snapped the first picture. Click, the war had begun. For a week, I was a shadow. I learned Richard's schedule better than he knew it himself. 9 a.m., gym. 10:30 a.m., Vance Holdings office. 1 p.m., lunch at Le Jardin, usually with investors. 4 p.m., site visits, which usually meant gambling at a private club downtown. 8 p.m., dinner or events. Richard was sloppy. He had lived a life without consequences, which made him lazy. He left his phone unlocked on cafe tables. He spoke loudly about bribes in semi-public places. He treated his staff like garbage. But the real gold wasn't Richard. It was his father, Marcus. Marcus Vance was the shark. Richard was just the remora swimming underneath. Marcus was careful. He didn't have affairs. He didn't gamble. He was strictly business. If I wanted to destroy Richard, I had to make him a liability to his father. I started following the money. I used the library Wi-Fi and some old contacts from the union days to dig into Vance holdings. They were in construction, big government contracts, bridges, highways, affordable housing. I found a forum online for disgruntled ex-employees. It took me 3 days of chatting under the username Rigrat66 to find a guy named Eddie. Eddie used to be a foreman for Vance Construction. He was fired 2 years ago for refusing to sign off on a concrete pour. I met Eddie at a diner at 4 a.m. He looked scared. "You're not a cop?" he asked, eyeing my rough hands. "I'm worse," I said. "I'm a father." I slid $5,000 of Richard's money across the table. "Tell me about the concrete." Eddie trembled. "They cut it with ash. High-density filler. It passes the initial inspection, but give it 5 years, 10 years. It cracks. They did it on the Riverfront Bridge project. Marcus saved $4 million on materials. Richard pocketed half of it for his consulting fee. Do you have proof?" "I have the original invoices," Eddie whispered, "and the emails where Richard told me to shut up or I'd end up in a pillar. I bought the flash drive from him for another $5 grand, 10,000 down, 40,000 to go. I sat in my car and plugged the drive into the laptop. It was all there: fraud, safety violations, threats. I could have gone to the police, but the nurse had said the police wouldn't touch them. The Vances owned the precinct. If I handed this over, it would disappear, and Eddie would end up dead. I needed the court of public opinion, but first, I needed to make Richard bleed. I decided to target Richard's vanity first. Richard prided himself on his image. He was the face of the new Atlanta, young, rich, charitable. He was scheduled to receive a Man of the Year award from a local business guild. I knew he was having an affair with the wife of the city comptroller. I had the photos. I had them in the car, in the hotel, holding hands. I didn't leak them to the press. Not yet. Instead, I printed one photo, just one. I put it in an envelope, no return address. I mailed it to Marcus Vance. 2 days later, I was parked outside the Vance office tower. I saw Richard storm out of the building, his face red. Marcus was standing in the glass lobby, looking like a statue of ice. Richard kicked the tire of his Porsche. He screamed at his valet. Daddy was angry. Richard's allowance was about to get cut. But I wasn't done. I knew Richard had a gambling debt. The private club he visited, the Velvet Room, was run by the local mob. Richard owed them big. He usually paid them with funds skimmed from the company accounts. The same accounts his father was now scrutinizing because of the photo. I waited until Richard went into the club. I waited an hour. Then, I called the police from a burner phone. "I'd like to report a hostage situation at the Velvet Room. I saw men with automatic weapons dragging a woman inside." I hung up and broke the phone in half, dropping it into a sewer grate. 10 minutes later, 6 squad cars and a SWAT van screeched around the corner. The police might be on the Vance payroll, but a call about a hostage situation and automatic weapons gets logged. They had to go in. I watched from the shadows as the police raided the illegal gambling den. They dragged out 24 men in handcuffs, and there, in the middle of them, was Richard Vance, hiding under a poker table, weeping. They didn't arrest him.
We are
Of
merely
course not.
observers
The
in a
captain
constant
arrived,
present.
We
whispered to
often
a
overlook
sergeant,
the simplest
and they
truths
uncuffed
because they are
Richard.
the hardest to
They let him
accept.
go out the back door,
But today,
but the
we must
mobsters,
face them together without blinking.
they were arrested. The club was shut down. The books were seized. Richard didn't just lose his playground. He lost the mob's money.
The illusion
He
of
was the
time
reason their
comforts us,
operation
yet
got
beneath
busted.
it, everything is
Now,
happening
the
all at
Vances
once.
had enemies they
We are
couldn't
merely
bribe.
observers
I
in a
coughed up
constant
something that looked
present.
like black
We
tar.
often overlook the
The pain in
simplest
my
truths
chest was a
because they are
constant
the
companion
hardest to
now.
accept.
A sharp knife
But
twisting
today,
between my
we
ribs
must face
every
them
time I took a
together
breath.
without
I had
blinking.
lost 15 pounds. My work clothes hung off me like scarecrow rags. I went to the hospital, not as a patient, but as a visitor. I wore a janitor's uniform I stole from a laundry truck. I pulled a cap low over my eyes. I snuck into the ICU. Chloe was still asleep. The bruising on her face had faded to a sickly yellow, but she looked so small, so fragile. The machines beeped in a rhythm that matched my own heart. "I'm here, baby girl," I whispered, holding her cold hand. "I'm cleaning the house. Just a little more trash to take out." I checked her chart. No change. But I noticed a note on the visitor log. Richard Vance, 5 minutes. He had visited yesterday. Why? He didn't care about her. I hid in the supply closet down the hall and waited. It took 6 hours, my legs were cramping, and I had to bite my tongue to stop from coughing. At 8 p.m., a doctor walked in, Dr. Eris. I recognized him. He was at the fundraiser photos with the Van Cess. He was their family doctor. He went into Chloe's room. He didn't check her vitals. He injected something into her 4 bag. He left 2 minutes later. I waited until the coast was clear, then I slipped into the room. I looked at the 4 bag. It looked normal. But I trusted my gut. I switched the 4 bag. I knew how to do it. I'd helped the medics on the rig enough times. I took the tainted bag and replaced it with a fresh saline one from the supply cart. I took the tainted bag with me. I had to know what was in it. I paid a private lab technician $3,000 to analyze the fluid in the bag, potassium chloride, she told me over the phone. High concentration. If this was administered quickly, it would cause cardiac arrest. It would look like a natural heart failure. They were trying to kill her. Richard wasn't just waiting for her to die. He was speeding it up. Probably because Chloe knew something, or maybe because he wanted to remarry the blonde mistress and needed the grieving widower phase to be over. My vision blurred. I wanted to drive to Richard's penthouse and hammer him into the ground like a rusted rivet. Control, I told myself. Control is the only weapon you have. If I killed Richard now, Marcus would bury the truth about the potassium. Dr. Eris would falsify the autopsy. I needed to take out the doctor first. Dr. Eris had a weakness too. Everyone does. His weakness was pharmaceuticals. I tailed him. He was selling prescription pads to dealers on the south side. I got photos of the exchange, but photos weren't enough. I waited until Dr. Eris left his clinic. I broke in. I wasn't a master thief, but I knew how to use a crowbar. I found his safe. It wasn't hard to crack. People who think they are untouchable use birthdays as combinations. Inside, I found patient files. Off-the-book files. Abortions for mistresses of senators. Overdose cover-ups for rich kids. And a file labeled, Vance, C. I opened it. It wasn't medical records. It was a prenup and a life insurance policy. Richard had taken out a $10 million policy on Chloe 3 months ago. Double indemnity for accidental death. That was the motive. The business was failing because Richard was stealing from it. He needed the $10 million to pay back the mob and cover his embezzlement before Marcus found out. I took the files. I left a note in the safe. I know what you put in the 4. You have 24 hours to turn yourself in, or everyone sees these files. Dr. Eris didn't turn himself in. He called Marcus Vance. I was tapping Marcus's phone line. I had climbed a utility pole 3 nights ago, a feat that almost stopped my heart, and installed a listener. Someone knows. Marcus. Eris panicked. They broke into the safe. Calm down. Marcus's voice was like gravel. It's probably that old man. The father. You said he was a nobody. You said he was back on a rig. I handled him, Marcus said. Clearly, I didn't handle him enough. I'll send Grave. Grave. The name sent a shiver down my spine. Grave was the Van Cess cleaner, ex-military. A ghost like me, but younger, stronger, and without cancer eating his lungs. I knew I had to move. Staying still was a death sentence, and not just from cancer. I left the motel under the cover of a thunderstorm, the rain washing away my tracks. For the next week, I became a phantom in a gray sedan. I slept in the driver's seat, curled up in Walmart parking lots under the harsh buzz of sodium lights, or parked deep within the skeletons of abandoned construction sites where the only sound was the wind whistling through steel girders. I was running out of energy. The disease was no longer knocking at the door. It had kicked it down and was ransacking the house. I was coughing up blood every hour now, thick, copper-tasting clumps that splattered onto the steering wheel. My hands shook so violently I had to grip the wheel with white-knuckled desperation just to keep the car straight. But through the haze of pain, I had a purpose. I had the evidence. I didn't trust the local precinct. Vance bought badges like he bought groceries, so I went higher. I sat in a library parking lot, stealing their Wi-Fi, and sent the file about the concrete scandal directly to the state attorney general's encrypted tip line. I mailed hard copies of the photos showing Richard and the comptroller's wife to the comptroller's home address, marked personal. I sent the proof of Dr. Eris's prescription trafficking to the DEA field office in Miami. I lit the fuses, one by one. Now I just had to survive the explosion. Grave found me 3 nights later. I was parked near the industrial docks, hidden behind a stack of rotting pallets, trying to snatch a few hours of feverish sleep. The silence of the waterfront was absolute, until it wasn't. I heard the crunch of gravel, slow, deliberate steps. It wasn't a security guard. A guard would have shown a flashlight. This was something else. I didn't think. Instinct, sharpened by 40 years on dangerous rigs, took over. I threw the car into reverse just as the driver's side window imploded. There was no gunshot, just the thud of a silenced round and the spray of tempered glass. A bullet whizzed past my nose, embedding itself in the dashboard. I slammed on the gas, spinning the wheel. The car fishtailed wildly, tires screaming against the wet asphalt. I saw him in the rearview mirror, illuminated by my reverse lights. A tall man dressed in black, holding a pistol with a terrifying, professional calm. He didn't run. He just adjusted his aim.
Consider the weight of a single
He fired
decision.
again. The rear
rippling
tire blew
outward
out with
through
a
time,
deafening pop.
affecting
The car
lives
lurched,
we will
the
never
rim grinding
know.
against the pavement,
The illusion
sending
of
a
time
shower of
comforts
orange
us, yet
sparks into the
beneath
night.
it, everything
I
is
couldn't
happening
outrun
all
him
at
on
once.
3 tires.
We are
I
merely
saw the edge of the
observers in
pier
a
rushing
constant
toward me.
present.
A
We
black
often
void
overlook
beyond
the
the chain
simplest
link
truths
fence.
because they
I
are
made
the
a
hardest
choice.
to accept.
I floored it.
But today,
the car
we
crashed
must
through the
face them
rusted fence,
together without
metal
blinking.
screeching against metal.
Oh,
As the
red
front wheels
moves
left the
now.
concrete, I unbuckled and threw the door open. I rolled out just as gravity took the car. I hit the
illusion
concrete
of
hard,
time comforts
the air
us,
driven
yet
from my
beneath
lungs,
it, everything
my
is
ribs
happening
screaming
all
in
at once.
agony. A
We are
splash,
merely
massive
observers
and
in a
heavy,
constant
echoed
present.
from below.
We often
I
overlook the
dragged
simplest
myself into the
truths
pitch-black
because they are the
shadows of a
hardest
shipping
to
container,
accept.
biting
But
my tongue
today,
to
we
stifle a
must
groan.
face them together
Moments later,
without blinking.
Grave walked to the edge of the broken pier. He looked down into the swirling dark water, watching the bubbles rise. He holstered his weapon. He thought I was in the car. He thought the water had done his job for him. I lay there for hours, shivering violently, bleeding from the glass cuts, listening to the distant wail of sirens. I had lost the car. I had lost the laptop, but I still had the burner phone taped to my ankle. And I still had the master copies of the files safely tucked away in a locker at the Greyhound bus station. I was alive. But I was dying faster now. The doctor had given me 60 days. Lying on that cold concrete, I felt like I was on day 59, hour 23. By the time I crawled back into the city, Atlanta was in chaos. I saw it on the TVs in an electronics store window. The news cycle was dominated by the Vance scandal. The comptroller had publicly filed for divorce and, in a scorched earth move, called for an immediate independent audit of Vance Holdings. The state attorney general had announced a grand jury investigation into the bridge concrete fraud. Dr. Aris had been dragged out of his clinic in handcuffs by DEA agents. His face plastered on every screen. Marcus Vance was fighting a war on 3 fronts. Vance Holdings stock had plummeted 40% in 24 hours. But Richard was still free, hiding behind his father's lawyers. And as long as Richard was free, Chloe was in danger. I knew Marcus's playbook. He was a survivor. He would try to liquidate his assets, stash the cash in offshore accounts, and flee before the indictments came down. He was planning a gala, the Vance Foundation charity ball, for tonight. It was framed as a fundraiser, but I knew it was a desperate last stand to rally his wealthy allies and secure emergency loans to fund his escape. I had to be there. I limped into a gas station bathroom. Under the flickering fluorescent light, I looked in the mirror. A corpse stared back. My skin was gray and papery, my eyes sunken into dark, bruised sockets. I looked like death warmed over. I washed the dried blood off my face. I shaved with a cheap disposable razor, cutting myself twice. I changed into the one suit I owned, a charcoal piece I'd bought from a thrift store with the last of my cash. It hung loosely on my wasted frame, but it would have to do. I taped the old revolver I'd bought on the street to my chest, right over my heart, hiding it under my dress shirt. I checked the cylinder. 2 bullets, that was all I had. I wasn't going to kill them. Violence would only make them martyrs. I was going to do something far more dangerous. I was going to walk onto that stage and confess. I was going to tell the world exactly who I was, and in doing so, I would strip them naked. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was a glittering, golden cage. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, casting prisms of light onto women dripping in diamonds and men whose wristwatches cost more than a year of my life on the rig. The air smelled of expensive perfume, truffle oil, and the sickening, metallic scent of hypocrisy. It was the Vance Foundation charity ball, a night where the elite of Atlanta gathered to pretend the world wasn't burning while they warmed their hands on the fire. At the center of it all stood Marcus Vance. He was on the raised stage, holding a champagne flute, looking like a king surveying his subjects. He projected strength, defiance, and untouchability. But beside him,
Consider the
the
weight
cracks
of
in the
a single
dynasty were
decision.
showing. Richard was
rippling outward
vibrating with
through
nervous
time,
energy, sweating
affecting
through his
lives
custom
we will never
tuxedo.
know.
He looked like
The
a man
illusion of
waiting for
time
the
comforts
executioner's
us,
axe
yet
to
beneath
fall,
it, everything
his
is
eyes
happening
darting
all
toward
at
the
once.
exits every few
We are
seconds.
merely
I didn't
observers in a
use the front
constant
door.
present.
I
We
came in
often
through the
overlook
service
the
entrance,
simplest truths
moving through
because
the
they are the
kitchen where
hardest
steam
to
rose
accept.
from massive pots
But
and line
today,
cooks
we
shouted
must
orders.
face them
I
together
walked right
without
past them.
blinking.
A sous chef looked up, opened his mouth to shout at me, and then closed it. He didn't stop me. I looked like a walking corpse, pale and gaunt,
The illusion
my
of
skin
time
clinging to my
comforts us,
skull.
yet beneath
People
it,
have an
everything is
instinctual need
happening
to look
all
away
at
from
once.
death, hoping
We are
that if they
merely
ignore
observers
it,
in
it
a
won't notice
constant
them.
present.
I was
We often
invisible.
overlook the
I was
simplest
a
truths
ghost.
because they are the
I pushed
hardest
through
to
the double
accept.
swinging doors
But
and stepped
today,
onto the
we
polished
must face
parquet
them
of the
together
ballroom floor.
without
The
blinking.
transition was violent. One moment, the kitchen clattered with a chaotic symphony of steam. The next, I was submerged in the ballroom's golden, suffocating amber. The air smelled of lilies and old money. I began the agonizing walk toward the stage, every step a battle against the fire in my lungs. My cheap shoes squeaked rhythmically against the polished parquet, a jarring, rubbery shriek cutting through the delicate Vivaldi like a rusty knife. Heads turned in a slow wave of confusion. The polite murmurs withered, replaced by a vacuum of shocked silence. The string quartet faltered, ending in a discordant screech. A heavy, judgmental hush descended. To them, I wasn't just an intruder. I was a dying omen in a mothball-scented suit, marching relentlessly toward their king to deliver a judgment they couldn't buy their way out of. "Security!" Richard shrieked, his voice cracking like a teenager's. The panic in his tone was pathetic. Two large men in earpieces started toward me from the wings. "Stop," Marcus commanded. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. He stared down at me from the stage, his eyes cold and hard like flint. He didn't know my face, but he knew who I was. He saw the intent in my stride. He knew the reckoning had arrived. I reached the base of the stage. My lungs were burning, every breath a jagged piece of glass in my chest. I reached into my pocket, and the movement caused a ripple of terror. The security guards drew their weapons, leveling Glocks at my chest. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the room. I didn't pull a gun. Not yet. I pulled out a wireless microphone I had swiped from the unattended podium near the stairs. I flipped the switch. Feedback screeched through the massive speakers, making the elite wince. "Ladies and gentlemen," I rasped. My voice was weak, destroyed by the tumors, but the speakers amplified it into a thunderclap. "My name is Jack Harper." Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. "That man," I said, lifting a shaking hand to point a finger directly at Richard's chest, "paid me $50,000 to let him kill my daughter." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I saw a senator's wife cover her mouth. I saw business partners exchange wary glances. "He poisoned her bag with potassium chloride," I continued, my voice gaining a jagged edge of rage. "He did it because he needs her $10 million life insurance policy. He needs it to pay back the mob debts he incurred while gambling away his father's company funds at the Velvet Room." "Liar!" Richard screamed, his face turning a blotchy purple. He lunged toward the edge of the stage, his hands curled into claws. Marcus moved faster than a man his age should. He grabbed Richard's arm, his grip bruising. "Shut up, you fool," he hissed, but the microphone caught it. "I have the audio," I lied. The words tasted like ash, but I delivered them with the conviction of a preacher. "I have the logs from the hospital proving the tamper. I have the sworn testimony of Dr. Eris, who is currently in a holding cell cutting a deal with the DEA to save his own skin." I shifted my gaze to Marcus. "This was the kill shot and you knew. You covered it up, just like you covered up the substandard concrete in the riverfront bridge. Just like you covered up the deaths of the 3 workers who fell when the scaffolding collapsed." From the shadows of the stage left, Grave appeared. The Van Cess cleaner. He moved like a panther, silent and lethal, reaching into his jacket. I lifted my shirt. The movement was slow, deliberate. I revealed the rusted revolver taped to my chest. "I have nothing to lose," I said, looking Grave in the eye. "I'm dead already. You want to shoot me? Go ahead. Put a bullet in my heart, but I promise you, the moment I drop, a dead man's switch activates. Every email, every photo, every bank statement goes to the New York Times, the FBI, and every news station in the country. It's on a timer." It was another lie, but in a room full of liars, The biggest
Consider
lie
the weight
wins.
of a single
Marcus
decision,
Vance looked out of the
rippling
crowd.
outward
He saw
through
the
time,
smartphones held high,
affecting
hundreds
lives
of little
we will
red
never
recording
know.
lights blinking like
The illusion
eyes.
of time
He saw the
comforts us,
disgust
yet
on the
beneath
faces
it,
of the people he
everything is
needed to
happening all at
survive.
once.
He saw his
We
legacy,
are merely
his
observers
empire,
in a
his
constant
life's
present.
work turning to
We
ash
often
in real
overlook the
time.
simplest
He
truths
looked at his
because
son,
they are the
the
hardest
weak
to
link,
accept.
the liability.
But today,
Marcus
we
turned
must
and
face them
slapped Richard.
together without
It was a
blinking.
vicious, backhanded strike that
One
cracked
red
like a
movie
whip stroke, echoing through the silent hall. Richard stumbled back, clutching his cheek, his eyes wide with
The
shock.
illusion of time
"You idiot,"
comforts us,
Marcus
yet
hissed,
beneath it,
his
everything
voice
is
trembling
happening
with
all
fury.
at once.
"You
We are
ruined
merely
everything."
observers in a
Richard
constant
snapped.
present.
The pressure,
We
the
often
drugs in
overlook
his
the
system,
simplest
the
truths
public
because they are the
humiliation,
hardest
the
to
fear of the
accept.
mob. It
But
all
today,
coalesced
we
into a
must face
blinding
them
madness.
together without
He saw the
blinking.
steak knife on a nearby banquet table. He grabbed it, his movements jerky and wild. "Die, you old relic!" Richard screamed, leaping off the stage toward me, the knife raised high. I didn't move. I physically couldn't. My legs had turned to stone. I watched the blade coming down, resigning myself to the end, but Grave moved. Grave wasn't loyal to Richard. He wasn't even loyal to Marcus. He was loyal to the payroll, and he knew that if Richard butchered a man on a live stream in front of 500 witnesses, there was no fixing it. The money would be gone. Grave tackled Richard in midair. They hit the floor with a sickening thud. The knife skittered across the parquet, spinning to a halt at the feet of a weeping debutante. Grave pinned Richard effortlessly, twisting his arm behind his back until Richard howled in pain. Then the sound came. Sirens, not one or two, but a symphony of them wailing in the distance, getting louder by the second. Real police this time, the FBI. The Attorney General. The cavalry had arrived to pick over the bones. My strength left me, the adrenaline that had sustained me for 60 days evaporated, leaving only a cold, hollow ache. I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a dull thud. I fell to my knees, my breath wheezing in my throat. I looked up at the stage. Marcus was sitting on a folding chair, his head in his hands, alone in the spotlight. He looked small. Defeated. Checkmate. I whispered into the silence. I woke up in a hospital bed, not the ICU. A regular room. There was a guard at the door, but he wasn't there to keep me in. He was there to keep the press out. A woman in a suit was sitting by my bed. "FBI, you caused a hell of a mess, Mr. Harper," she said. "Did you get them?" I wheezed. "Richard is in custody. Attempted murder, insurance fraud, embezzlement. He's singing like a bird to cut a deal against his father. Marcus is looking at 20 years for RICO charges. The dynasty is over." "And Chloe?" The agent smiled. A genuine smile. "She woke up yesterday. The doctors flushed the potassium out. She's weak, but she's going to make it." I closed my eyes. Tears leaked out, hot and stinging. "Can I see her?" "She's just down the hall." They wheeled me in. Chloe was sitting up. She looked pale, but her eyes were open, those blue eyes. My wife's eyes. She saw me. "Dad?" Her voice was a croak. I couldn't speak. I just reached out and took her hand. "I'm here, baby," I managed to say. "I'm here, Richard." She started to panic. "Richard is gone," I said firmly. "He can't hurt you. Nobody can hurt you. I took care of the trash." She looked at my face, at the tubes in my nose, at the gray pallor of my skin. She realized. "Dad, you're sick." "I'm just tired, Chloe. Just tired." We sat there for an hour. We didn't talk much. We just existed in the same space, safe. I told her about the rig, about the sunsets over the ocean, about how much I loved her mother. I didn't tell her about the gun, or the blackmail, or the fear. I wanted her to remember me as her dad, not a monster. I'm writing this from the hospice wing. The FBI agent brought me my notebook. My breathing is shallow now. The intervals between breaths are getting longer. The pain is gone, replaced by a heavy numbness. Chloe is safe. She's going to sell the house, take the settlement money from the Vance estate, and move to the coast. She wants to open a bakery. She always made good cinnamon rolls. I have 1 hour left. Maybe 2. I look at the check for $50,000. I still have it in my pocket. I never spent the last dime of it. I asked the nurse for an envelope. I put the remaining cash, about $400, and the check stub inside. I wrote a name on the envelope. The nurse in the ICU, the one who had angry tears in her eyes. The one who told me the truth. She deserves a vacation. I look out the window. The sun is setting. The sky is a bruise of purple and orange. I think about Richard Vance, sitting in a cold cell, stripped of his suits and his Rolex, realizing that he was beaten by a dying man with a GED and a grudge. Don't let anyone tell you that you are powerless. A man is only powerless when he has something to lose. When you strip everything away, fear, future, hope, you are left with pure will, and will can move mountains. Or bury dynasties. My name is Jack Harper. I was an oil rigger, I was a father, and I finished the job.
Hearing Jack's final words to his daughter really broke my heart. It really shows that true power isn't about money or status, but the sheer will to protect the ones you love. I was rooting for him every step of the way. What would you have done if you were in Jack's shoes? Would you have taken the money or burned it all down? Let me know in the comments below.